Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gail from Community's Digital News, Daniel from the Inscriber. Put your thing on mute, Daniel. I'm hearing some background, unfortunately. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report live YouTube show slash podcast, as well as blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. And unfortunately, given what we will cover this week, one tragedy happens in the sport. We will talk about it as well. If you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the blog page is the place to go to. P4P Boxing Report .wordpress.com. That's the link. You check the right of the blog page, you will find links to where to find us all over social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We will have to make some adjustments because as folks who are on YouTube, check us out on YouTube, or who do their own podcasting on YouTube. YouTube is ending live hangouts and whatnot on the 1st of August, but we will find a way. We will find a way to upload each episode on YouTube and keep the thing going in that route. So check the right of the link to find us where to find us on social media. Also check the right of the blog page to find us on any available platform that carries RSS feed, be it iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, Google Play Music, Stitcher, the whole spiel, Player FM for the folks in the UK. And also links to our donation buttons. Let donation be the best nations. We got two donate links, PayPal and Cash Me account. Just check the right of the blog page. Again, in the same vicinity, the same areas where you'll find links to where to find us on social media, where to find us RSS platforms. Also, last but not sure, I usually say this at the ending of the show. I'm gonna say it now. I am a online coach with Beachbody.com. Link to my coaching page. I am doing a fitness challenge this month. Let's build together for July. Going to continue that on into August. If you're interested, wink, wink, nod, nod. Daniel Gale. Just check out. Just hit me up. Hit the Pound for Pound Box Report up on Twitter. Just hit me up on my personal Twitter, brother Jr. Or just click the link to the coaching page online where you can find links to the 2-week trial. Check the and you just just hit links to the 2-week fitness trials. There's a bunch of 2-week trials that are going on continuously on Beachbody.com. Take advantage of that. 2 weeks of all access to Beachbody on demand. We can check out all the programs and whatnot. You can try out for free. And if you like it there, again, holler at me for a fitness challenge or a challenge pack. Let's get things going by recapping what went down really over the last 2 weeks. I'm going to start with last weekend. And I see Daniel's dipped out. Hope to have him back. Main fights last weekend took place in Dallas. Unification bout at 140 pounds. WBC champion Jose Ramirez fighting WBO champion Maurice Hooker in Hooker's home area of Arlington, Texas. Very exciting fight, back and forth battle to the end, but ultimately Ramirez in the sixth caught Hooker, had Hooker badly hurt, pounced. The referee stepped in and stopped the fight. I'll go to you, Gail. You anticipated a good fight going in. You end up getting just that. One of the fights of the year. Ramirez, who struggled in his last fight, arguably lost. I know some people who felt he did lose his last fight. Rose to the occasion, in my opinion, fighting in Hooker's essentially hometown. To me, he controlled the pace from jump. I didn't exactly like Hooker's fighting style. He was in tight too much, but the other side of that is Ramirez was in his chest all night long. He got in and stayed in. Really didn't give Hooker much room to breathe, and he used that to finally catch up to Hooker, hurt him, and finish him off.
Yeah, he sure did. I think the function of Hooker being so close was less Hooker's doing than Ramirez doing. The way for Ramirez to negate Hooker's really impressive reach and the tools he had was to crowd him and get right up in his face. Now, by doing that, he knew he was going to take a few shots. And he did. And he walked through some of the best that Hooker had to offer. And that is when you knew, okay, I think Maurice Hooker is going to have a very uphill climb here. I had picked Hooker as the slight favorite. But credit to Ramirez. He is one of those guys that fights up to the level of his competition. I think when he has a kind of a rougher, a raggedy fight, it's because he isn't fighting somebody at his level. Well, this time he got somebody like that, and he got the business done. And what a sudden ending out of nowhere. Ramirez scores on a right hook and just lets it rip. And that is what trainers should show young fighters about when you get your opponent in trouble and you have the opportunity to close the show. That's what you need to do. There is no point in saving it. If you can get the job done, get it done. And Ramirez knew that the door of opportunity had swung open, and he took it. But up until that point, it was a very competitive fight. You know, both guys had their moments. Like I say, when I saw Ramirez take some pretty hard shots and weather them really well, I knew we were in, for the potential of Ramirez being able to be the last guy standing, and we were. It wasn't, and as good a performance as it was by Hooker, I'm not sure it was his best performance, but he was in the ring with a tough guy. And due credit to both men, they handled themselves respectfully. They didn't, other than a really bad call on a knockdown in the first round, which occurred because Ramirez stepped on Hooker's foot and landed a punch, and the referee apparently did not see the foot on top of the foot, which is clearly the reason he fell backward. Hooker did protest, but once he had his say, he moved on, got down to business. But both guys were respectful. Both guys gave a nod, tip of the hat to each other. Hooker said after the fact, the better man won. It wasn't wasn't my night. And then Ramirez in turn said, that first round knockdown wasn't a knockdown. I know it wasn't. So that's the way true champions should handle themselves in the ring. And a lot of other guys should watch that. Really, really a good fight of the weekend, in my opinion.
Here's the question following what we saw Saturday. Where does Ramirez go from here? I mean, okay, now he's unified WBC, WBO champion. The issue is the other two guys, Progress, who was in the building, scouting, watching, and he's going to fight Progress, WBA champion, excuse me, going to fight IBF champion Taylor sometime later on this year. Don't know when, but they're tied up right now. Who do you see Ramirez fighting until a possible fight against the winner of Progress and Taylor?
Well, and that's going to be a tough one, because the fight that Ramirez really should have next is another unification fight. But he knows he won't be sitting out that long, and he seems open, to other possibilities while he's sort of, making time until we get Prograis and Taylor in the ring. He seemed to be willing to take just about anybody at 140. So, we'll see who they dish up for him. I'm not sure a lot of guys are, racing to fight him at 140. I think you're going to get somebody looking for a main event opportunity that hasn't had one before. They'll probably put Ramirez back in Fresno, which is in his hometown area. He's actually from another little California Central Valley town called Avenal, but he's from the big farming agricultural region there in California, and he will put 15,000 paid tickets, paid butts in the seats in Fresno, and those fans don't even care who's across from him. So they'll find somebody either rising from the ranks or on their way back down, just to keep him in front of the public.
I mean, Catterall is the number one contender by the BO. I know in Hooker's previous fight, he kind of called out Catterall. I can think possibly they can make Ramirez fight Catterall probably in Fresno. Uh, that could be an option in terms of his next fight towards the end of the year, early next year. But it'll be interesting to see how active Arum intends to keep Ramirez until a fight against the winner of Prograis and Taylor, who Ramirez, to his credit, said he wants the winner of that. He wants to become undisputed champion at 140 pounds. Let's move on to going to combine two fights into one here on the undercard of Ramirez and Hooker. You had Tevin Farmer fighter by the name of French fighter by the name of Francois. He won by decision. Interesting how Farmer was booed after the bout. Same nights in his hometown of Baltimore, Gervonta Davis made easy work of Ricardo Nunez. Second round KO. You just knew that fight was going to be easy work. As soon as he started to land with power, and once he landed with power, the fight was basically over. The question is, in the aftermath of both of those fights, uh, given what Farmer said afterwards about the possibility of fighting Tank, in which he said, yeah, he's open for the fight. He wants to fight, but he's not going to wait for him. I don't get that because you've been calling him out for 2-3 years. And in the aftermath of Davis's fight with Nunez, where he and Floyd Mayweather, who did a lot of controlling of their post-fight press conference, let's face it, anytime Tank wanted to answer something, Floyd was basically grabbing the mic to say something. I don't get how it didn't make Tank look good, in my opinion. But both Davis and Floyd finally said, let's make a fight with Tevin Farmer at the end of the year. The question I pose to you, Gail, will we see it? I know they were talking. And I see Jacob has joined us. I know all parties was talking them fighting each other in a unification bout. But I get the serious feeling it's not going to happen. Not this year, at least.
I don't think it will, despite all the talk, despite the the stated willingness after the fight this weekend. I just don't see it. And Lord knows, he doesn't want a piece of anybody else that's out there, ranked up there in the top 10. He didn't want any piece of Miguel Burchell. Nobody wants to touch Andrew Cancio right now, who was watching and making a lot of comments on Twitter, about what was going on. The one and only guy that got mentioned was Jojo Diaz, which is kind of interesting. If Floyd and Oscar De La Hoya want to do business, okay. I think I don't think that's a great fight for a lot of reasons. I think it would only reinforce what the fans don't like about either of them. I think that both of them are better suited to other dance partners. That was a lot of the discussion on Saturday. Because Farmer got booed big in the ring. And his opponent, Guillaume Francois, was kind of getting up in the corners and waving to the crowd. And they were cheering for him, which was sort of amazing. And he was laughing about it. Farmer basically said in not so many words, some more polite, some less polite, kind of, piss off everybody. This is how I roll. This is what I do. I just keep winning. You don't like it, you can suck it. That's pretty much what he said. And he's not lying, but he's going to cause himself problems getting the biggest money fights because he's a hard sell. He is a hard sell. he is a technician. He knows exactly what he needs to do to win, and no more, no less, thank goodness. And he's very plain about, listen, I'm not one of those stupid idiots that wants to stand in there and get hit. No, I'm not interested in that. I want my mind and my wits about me, and my rest for the rest of my life. And yeah, and he doesn't really care what anyone else thinks as long as he's rolling up the W's. And I think he's in a better position to argue that given the events of the last 10 days, because the boxing world is thinking about fighter safety and fighter health. But he needs to watch his attitude and his tone when he says so. He's a little defiant about it, a little kind of, you can suck it. What he needs to say is, listen, you know, my health and my livelihood are important to me, and this is how I choose to approach a fight, and these are the skills I'm bringing to the table. I think he'd be better received if he did that. But it's hard when everyone's booing you and you've just won. I do get that.
I see Jacob has joined us from Jab Hook Boxing. Thanks for joining us, Jacob. I'll just bring you into the conversation right now. We're talking Tevin Farmer, his win over Guillaume, Tank Davis, his win over Nunez, and the question on the table is, uh, given the comments of both camps after the fight, do you see these two cats fighting each other at the end of the year? So talk about that, as well as your quick thoughts on uh, Jose Ramirez and his stoppage win over Maurice Hooker.
So first off, I no, I don't think that they'll fight. I think I actually heard the opposite of what Gal heard. I heard that Jojo Diaz was going to be an opponent for a possible opponent for Tevin Farmer because they're on the DAZN platform, and that's a more of an easier fight to make. And they had that little scuffle. I can't remember what fight they were at, but they kind of had that little scuffle outside in Vegas. I think it was Vegas, where they were kind of jawing at each other. But I think there's even further evidence with the PBC during the Thurman Pacquiao fight when they were showing the welterweight champions and they didn't even mention Bud, on their little graphic. So it's like if it's not within their network, they're not really. I don't think they're really looking or recognizing those fights. But to Gail's point, I think Tevin Farmer could keep on winning, but the quality of opposition that you win against and especially how you win, I think is gonna, determine on how far he goes because you can keep on beating up or keep on not getting the decision wins against these guys that aren't on your level. And I don't really know what that does for yeah, you're still in defeat or you're still getting the wins, but you're not. It's not really building on anything. You're winning fights you're supposed to win. The main thing would be to unify or get a big challenger. So I agree with her in that sense that his talking of I'm this is the way I am, this is what I'm going to do. I don't know, might not get him the fights that he needs to get to submit his legacy if he really wants to do that. And then as far as the Ramirez, I actually counted Ramirez out in that. I thought he was going to be the weaker link of that, but he landed that. I think it was a left hook punch and hurt him in Hooker, and I thought it was a really good fight up to that point. Hooker was barely missing with some pretty brutal shots, but I also didn't like that Hooker let himself go to the ropes and let Ramirez kind of dictate that pace, and he wasn't using his length, and I thought that was a bad strategy. But I don't know if the weight had something to do with it too, because he is a big guy for that, and I know it's a challenge for him to make that weight. But hats off to Ramirez, man. He came in on a different platform that not his ESPN Top Rank platform, and he went into the Lions Den and he put on a good fight and he stopped his guy. There's no better victory than that because it doesn't go to the judges and there's no controversy.
Indeed, let's move on to talk about some more fights here. Going to go back a couple of weeks a couple of weeks here. We were off last week. Um, Personal decision on my part, and I'll explain as we get into the news. We haven't had the opportunity to talk about Keith Thurman, Manny Pacquiao, that fight that took place on the 20th of July. Pacquiao defeating Thurman by decision. I'll go to you, Jacob. A lot of people are saying that Pacquiao essentially turned back the clock. Amazed by at age 40, he was able to perform in the way he did. I want to give him credit for the win, but I say this even though I picked Thurman, I personally thought Thurman was going to win heading in just because of the fact that he was younger. I always felt that Thurman was flawed as a fighter. And I felt that if Pacquiao, I felt that the layoff of Thurman, because this is basically his second fight after nearly 2 year layoff, it could possibly play a role. Plus, technically, Thurman, you can hit him, you can hit him with shots, and we all know how he's weak up the gut. Was this a case of Pacquiao, quote unquote, turning back the clock, or were the flaws that that a lot of folks suspected in Thurman were finally exposed to the degree in which he's suffering now?
Um, I don't think it was Pacquiao turning back the clock because even though he won the fight in my eyes and on the cards, split decision, I still feel. I mean, he's still a good fighter, but he hasn't turned back the clock. He's not the Pacquiao that he was. He still has some speed and good foot movement. But he did get tired during those later rounds, and he's not the same. He's not even the same body that he was. I mean, when he was at the lower weights, he was, as he was moving up, he was doing some great work. But Thurman, I always thought he was, kind of the weaker link, and I had picked Pacquiao to win this fight. Thurman, for all his, one-time Thurman, and supposedly has all this power. I mean, he landed some pretty good right hands on Pacquiao, like pretty flush, and it didn't really seem to phase Pacquiao. So I don't know if that power, yeah, maybe when he was knocking out like lower level guys, yeah, they can say you have power, but as his competition has stepped up, he hasn't really done a lot of, mauling and beating up guys. He might knock a guy down, but he doesn't really knock him out. I think maybe the last one was Collazo, but even in that fight, he was hurt. And in this fight, he was hurt to the body by Manny. But yeah, I mean, it was a pretty entertaining fight. But I also think that Thurman, for all the shit he talked, that he didn't. To me, he didn't seem like he put the pedal to the metal in the later rounds. Like he was. I think they said he had bet on himself to knock out Pacquiao in like the first, second, and like seventh round, and I just didn't really see a lot of like aggression. There would be spurts, but like not what I would think of somebody that thinks he's gonna maul the other guy and put him into retirement. So I don't know where that game plan just didn't seem to pan out, and I think he was a little shook by that first round when he took that knockdown.
Now you kind of stole my point there, Jacob. And first of all, I want to give a shout out to Denise, who's listening live, watching live on YouTube. She commented that Pacquiao, in her opinion, did age a bit in that fight against Thurman. Jacob kind of took my point, Gail. To me, Thurman, first round, 10th round. First round, he shook Thurman. I'm not just in terms of physically when he got knocked down, but from a mental standpoint. The fact that he was able to not just put Thurman down, Gail, but hurt him as he put him down because his legs stiffened when he got knocked down in that first round. It took a while for Thurman to really recover from that. It let him know that yeah, Thurman. He was doing a lot of talking, dismissing Pacquiao to the point where he just thought he was just going to be just some easy work. I mean, why would he think that? That that's dumb to me. You don't need to hype the fight that much because and if you really believe that, you stupid. This is Manny Pacquiao we talking about here. So the first round, he really got Thurman's attention from a physical and a mental standpoint. And then in the 10th round, when Thurman started to come on in the second half of the fight, that body shot that hurt Thurman took the fight out of him, Gail. Uh, so it was those seminal moments that was the key, more than anything, to Pacquiao's victory, in my view. Your reaction to what you saw?
I was ringside for the fight and had participated in quite a bit of the lead-up interviews and so forth. And I noted several times some troubling comments by Thurman. Not necessarily the words, but the fact that he introduced some topics that planted a lot of doubt in my mind. Mental fitness is so important going into a fight. Yes, you have to be physically fit. Yes, you have to be trained. But I'm one of those people that believes all fights are won or lost in the mind long before anyone steps in the ring. And the days leading up to the fight can be really pivotal in setting that mindset. Thurman, leading up to the fight, yes, he talked a little trash, but on the other hand, he also complimented Pacquiao. He called him a living legend. He was returning after 2 years off due to injury and other pursuits, shall we say. He got married during that time. He's been very involved, kind of seeing the world, living his life, living his best life. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But he admits right up till and through his last fight, he didn't train seriously at all. It is absolutely true that he trained himself for his last fight, and his conditioning was taking spin classes at LA Fitness. That is crazy. That is crazy. And I think a lot of the big talk was directed at himself, pumping up himself. But he also admitted in the lead up to the fight that he talked very openly about the 2 years he was off and a period of time during that 2 years where he was very depressed, thinking, is my career over at age 28, 29? Am I done? Is this as much as I'm going to accomplish ever? And he said that, it really hurt. It really saddened him. And that he snapped himself out of that chain of thought, got back in the gym, and he admitted that part of the depression was, as Michael, as a trainer, you don't have those endorphins running through you and that good feeling of being in shape. You will get depressed, and he was. But he also talked about, I'm not sure how much longer I want to be in the ring. I don't want to be one of those guys in my later years that, doesn't have my mind about me. I don't really want to be getting hit for a living all that much more. Hearing all that stuff, what I'm hearing Thurman say is, I got one foot out the door.
When he was asked about fighting Bud during fight week, and he basically said that Bud, I'm not thinking about Bud Crawford. Why would I want to fight Bud Crawford? Alarm bells rung to me because you're supposed to be in full on fight mode. You don't give a damn who it is. You go in there and it's like, come one, come all. I'm taking them all out.
Beast mode. Right. Even if you're talking yourself into it, I think a lot of the comments about, I'm going to kick his ass, I'm 10 years younger than he is, blah, 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 were directed at himself. I mean, he was working on his mind and attitude. During the exchanges, Pacquiao was just sitting there just grinning. I mean, he just laughs. And then when he got asked about it, he said, that doesn't bother me. It motivates me. He said, it makes my mom mad, but that's about it. And everybody laughs, right? That Thurman's, the only person he's pissing off is Manny's mom. And he meant it. It's been a long time since I saw Manny Pacquiao this relaxed, this focused, you know, yeah, he had the entourage around him, but it wasn't quite as bad as it sometimes is. And I do think he worked his ass off to get in shape. He looked good. Is he the Manny Pacquiao who, even the Manny Pacquiao who knocked out Ricky Hatton? No. But the fact is, even a slowed down version of Pacquiao is still superior to almost any other guy of the current era. And he had a house full of fans. There were very few fans in that arena on the Thurman train. Very much like the British fans or the Kazakhstan fans, the Filipino fans travel, especially to the West Coast. I would consider for this purpose Las Vegas the West Coast. I mean, they were there. They were there all week. They were going to VIP events. Two women who I think were political donors were sitting next to me at one of the news conferences with special badges on them. Nice women of a certain age. And I thought, what are you doing here? I mean, and everybody you ask is either Pacquiao's auntie or cousin. I mean, every single person. It's hilarious. And that had a lot to do with it too. And they roared every time something happened. When he scored the knockdown in the first round, he put Thurman down into a hole that he was going to have to dig out of. I do think it woke Thurman up. Finally realized, geez, I'm in a fight and there's a lot of people in this arena and a lot of stuff going on, and I don't want to embarrass myself, and good for him. He did do everything he could do, but Pacquiao won the fight with that body shot in the 10th round. How Thurman didn't go down, I don't know. He bent at the waist, he buckled at the knees, his right hand dropped to his side, and his glove was an inch from the canvas, having that counted as a knockdown. And then he didn't spit his mouthpiece out. He reached up and purposely took it out because he needed to gasp for air. That's how hard he got hit. Pacquiao put the punch exactly in the right place. And in the end, that is really what won him the fight, in addition to coming out so hard, so fast at the opening bell. It was a tremendously exciting fight to be at in person. The crowd was as into this fight as any crowd I've seen, even a predominantly Mexican crowd. It was a tremendous atmosphere, and most of the folks in that arena walked off into the 100-degree heat, happy, wanting to party, eat and drink, and spend money. And that's considered a success for a Vegas fight.
3 questions I'm going to pose before we move on to talk about other matters. I'll go to you. First question, Jacob, in reaction to this fight. A lot of people made big stink about the issue of VADA testing. There's been questions about Pacquiao. Let's just put it out there. There's been questions about Pacquiao. First, a quick comment here in the chat. Denise said, responding to your comments, Gail, your points about Thurman and the mental weakness. Denise said, Gail, you hit the nail on the head. Back to the question to you, Jacob. Let's just put it out there. There are a lot of people that speculated throughout Pacquiao's career that he may have taken performance-enhancing drugs, and that argument sprung up again in the aftermath because there was no VADA testing for this fight. Your thoughts on that? For me, if you want to bring that up, okay. My issue is, Jacob, if their folks were so concerned about it, Thurman agreed to it. He didn't get tested for VADA as well. So bring that argument up about Pacquiao to kind of put an asterisk on his win. But Thurman, you're the champ. Thurman, you're talking all this stuff of A-side. He didn't complain about it. He went along with it. So are those arguments null and void?
That's a tough one to say whether they're null and void. I mean, in a perfect world, we would have everybody would be tested. But to your point, if somebody signs a fight at a weight, at a venue, at all the particulars that go into a fight, and didn't bring up the whole what do you call it, the drug testing, for this fight, it's kind of like you can't cry wolf after. And it might be this noise, I would suspect, is from people that were in the Thurman, thought that Thurman was going to win the fight and were disappointed by him not winning the fight. So the automatic thing to do is to try to discredit, and bring up, stuff from before. Again, I don't know that, he's never been, as far as I know, has never been found guilty of doping or any of the performance enhancing. But I mean, again, I don't have all the, the testing is different than it was back then, and there's so many different changes to the sport, and I'm sure there's ways around it. And people figure out different things to do. So but that's, it's all past now. I mean, we can't go back in time and put any asterisks in there, because it is what it is. But I also find it wildly convenient that Thurman, like if Thurman had won this fight or had knocked him out, I don't think we would be hearing a lot of these, what I kind of consider excuses of, oh, his head wasn't in it, or he's lost confidence and all that stuff. It just seems like when these guys lose, especially after they've been talking so much trash. I mean, because Thurman he talked a lot of trash. Then it's like, oh well, there's all these excuses. Um, but maybe it's just as simple as Manny is just a better fighter than Thurman, and Thurman isn't as special as maybe some of his fans thinks he is.
Speaking of talking trash, and I'll go to you on this one, Guillaume. Uh, person who talked trash after the fight was one Adrian Broner. Um, I know a lot of folks, myself included, have been highly critical of AB. Um, but for once, he has a point. What do I mean? In the aftermath of the fight, AB was being interviewed by multiple folks, and he basically made the charge that Thurman uh, was out here, was not really serious for the fight. He was playing. What evidence did he suggest made him think? What was the evidence behind that? He was noting that Thurman, the week of the fight, was in the casinos gambling 4 in the morning. And what we now know, uh, nearly 2 weeks later, well, over a week later, I should say, after the fight, that what Broner's claims about Thurman was true, as there are photos now that have sprung up in the in the 9 days now after the fight of Broner, excuse me, of one time in a casino, 3, 4 in the morning, gambling the week of the fight. Your reaction uh, to that? Uh, do you put much stake in the fact that Thurman was in the casinos the week of the fight and should have been getting his rest, uh, getting his body completely right?
First of all, right now, zero. And here's why. There is absolutely no legit verification that those photos are legit, or that they were from July. Yeah, Thurman's been in Vegas plenty of times. We have no idea whether they were taken contemporaneous to the fight or not. I think that we would have seen a hell of a lot more photos of Thurman, taken by fans, showing up on social, selfies. Thurman's a very gregarious guy. You don't tell me that the fans wouldn't have outed him being in the casino at 4 in the morning long before Broner did. I'm not buying it. I'm not. But for the sake of
Problem is, Broner hasn't refuted the story. I hadn't seen.
Thurman, well, in some cases, you just don't want to, even engage. I think Thurman has gone off, to lick his wounds and, headed off to Nepal to hide. And hey, more power to him. Get your mind right. I don't think he needs to answer this stuff because you really have.
And we know Thurman was in the aftermath of the weigh-in. He was not eating the healthiest, eating pizza. I'm just saying.
Well, I've seen a lot of guys eat some crazy shit. Let's just put it that way. Some guys can do it, some guys can't. I mean, I've seen, honestly, I have seen some really crazy stuff. As an aside, one guy that can eat like a house on fire right up to a fight, it's just amazing to me, is Dmitry Bivol. That kid can just pound it. That's a sidebar. Let's go ahead and assume, for the sake of argument, that Thurman was in the casino at 4 a.m. So what? So what? The boxing universe is, uses a very altered time clock. They do not work from 9 to 5. A lot of guys run at night. Floyd himself was famous for doing his road work at 2 a.m. all the time because it's hella hot in Vegas. Let me tell you, first day I was there, it was 113. It was 107 every other day. When I left the fight, I'd been inside for, at that point, 7 or 8 hours. I walked outside and thought, wow, it's really nice out here tonight. Yeah, because it was only 94 degrees at midnight and it felt cool to me. That's the deal. So what if he's sitting at the casino? Now, if he had been drinking, different story. There's no accusations he was boozing it up. Nothing like that. They're not the smoke-filled rooms of the 50s at all. And I'm not troubled by it. I'm not. If that's how he relaxes and it's early in the morning, as long as he got 8 hours of sleep between 6 and 2, what do I care? And maybe that's, that altered body clock is by design. It's very possible. Guys really operate very, very late at night. A lot of guys do workouts at 10, 11, midnight. And as you both know, a lot of fights on the East Coast don't go down until midnight. So to alter their body clock toward that direction is actually a very smart thing to do. I think Thurman had a lot of extraneous issues that affected his performance in the fight. I absolutely do not think this was one of them. I consider the source. I dismiss the source. But even if it's true, I'm not troubled by it. There were other things, far bigger problem than him sitting at a, craps table or blackjack table or wherever the hell he was.
I see Daniel is back. Let me bring him to the discussion, a comment here on YouTube. Quantum says that Thurman admitted to Kevin Iole that he was addicted to cortisone, which is a PED, is taken in conjunction with HGH. I don't know about that, Quantum. I will have to look that up. Matter of fact, I will look that up after this show. But it's just a comment in the YouTube chat. I want to bring Daniel to the discussion. We're talking Thurman Pacquiao. Pacquiao's win over Thurman. The two questions on the table. Your reaction to those who question Pacquiao's victory, noting the fact that Nevada testing was done for this fight. My argument is, okay, if you want to bring that, fine. But Thurman, he was the one who agreed to Nevada testing as well. And he didn't make an issue of it after the fight. So where's the complaints, A? B, your reaction to Broner's charge of Thurman was out in the casinos gambling 3, 4 in the morning the week of the fight.
The PD allegations, like I said, that's something that is always a dangerous assumption to make. But like I said, that's what bothered to me about the whole Pacquiao situation. Like, how, okay, you've been accused in some way, shape, or form, despite things, we have to mention it again. You have not failed the test, but the hovering of PD allegations has been around for you since as early as the second Eric Morales fight. So there's always going to be a sense of taint between when it comes to Pacquiao, when it comes to these situations. Even though, like you mentioned it, he has never failed a test. Now, Broner, the whole Broner situation, I think it's just something where he has to probably make excuses because, let's face it, that fight with Thurman was a lot closer than Pacquiao's fight with Broner. So he has to. So Broner probably needs own insecurities, is trying to find ways to knock down Thurman or trying to make him look like, see, I was still a better opponent to Pacquiao than you were. Now, as far as I know, there's no evidence, no video evidence, no eyewitness accounts other than Broner's mouth saying, hey, here's Thurman at 4 o'clock in the morning in the Golden Nugget. You don't see that. So this is just like another like situation where it may just be Broner trying to run his mouth once again.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute. One final question for everybody here. The direction, where do both fighters go from here? Pacquiao has the win. You got Spence Porter out there. They're going to fight each other in September. You got Danny Garcia out there. Bud is out there. I'm not going to say he's across the street because Crawford took exception to that statement. They interviewed him at the Ramirez Hooker fight. He was like, "No, I'm not across the street. I'm here." And he gave the example of the fight between Ramirez Hooker, Ramirez being an Arum fighter, Hooker being a DAZN fighter. If that his argument was, if that fight can happen, why can't a situation where I, Crawford, fight the other champions PBC? Why can't those fights happen? So that's his stance. I'm gonna go with his words. So you got Crawford out there. So where does Pacquiao go? And where does Thurman go after this defeat? He lost, but he didn't look terrible. He performed well for a good majority of the bout, but particularly the second half of the bout. He didn't embarrass himself in there. He just lost. So where do both fighters go from here? And anybody who wants to jump in first, I don't care.
Well, we all know who was ringside. We all know who was sitting there.
Yeah, the nightmare scenario.
No, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that a second time. I don't care what Pacquiao tweets and what he said after the fight. I don't want. Who really wants to see that again?
No, I don't need to see it again. As you know, the fight was announced during fight week between Errol Spence and Sean Porter. First news conference held the afternoon of the fight. As a matter of fact, earlier in that day, those two men appeared, and the assumption was that the winner of the fight later in the evening would fight the winner of that bout, which means, is Pacquiao going to fight the winner between Spence and Porter? And if we all assume it's Errol Spence, I think that's a really bad idea. Really bad idea. Pacquiao's got 2 more years before he can run for president of the Philippines. He can run in 2022. In the meantime, there's sort of this expectation that he's going to keep fighting, and he seems to think he is. I, for one, would really like to see him walk away with this big triumph in hand. He's the hero of his people. He's got another huge career in the limelight ahead of him, in theory. The president of his country, considering where he came from. I mean, if you read a movie script like this, you'd just say, this is ridiculous. This could never happen. And you would want him to go forward, not any more hurt than he already is, to govern his country, rather than risk getting pounded, getting injured, getting killed. And maybe the events of the last few weeks will give his family and his entourage something to talk about. The one thing that has me hopeful is there was a moment after the fight when his longtime trainer, Freddie Roach, who, has made his career based on his work with Pacquiao in large part, after there was a lot of big talk and excitement in the ring, and who are you going to face next? What was it going to be? You and Spence? Is it going to be you and Mayweather? What's going on? Roach more or less said, not so fast, everybody. We got a lot to talk about in the next few months. That tells me that Freddie is thinking, Manny, if you were ever going to walk off into the sunset, now's the time. And I really hope he talks him into it. And that was a very different attitude than we saw from Roach when Pacquiao announced he was retiring in 2016 after he beat Jesse Vargas. He vowed he was retiring. I was sitting there and we asked him over and over, come on, Manny, are you really sure you're retiring? He insisted. He wiggled a little bit. At that point, though, Freddie Roach, he was asked, well, Freddie, if Manny retires, are you going to retire? And he says, hell no. I don't have anything better to do. I'm going to keep working. And he said, I would be really sad if he retired. And of course, as we all know, he didn't. So I saw something very different. I hope Freddie does it. I'd like to see him retire. I really would. I don't need to see him in the ring again. I'm not sure it's a performance he can repeat. I think it was lightning in a bottle. I really do. And that's the way I prefer to see it as a fan.
Jacob, Daniel, your thoughts on the direction of both fighters?
Go ahead, Daniel.
No, I was about to cough. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to see Pacquiao retire a while ago, but like I always say this, these guys don't walk away, they don't do that, walk off into the sunset. It's very, 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 very rare. So, and I think he even said in the post-fight conference with their post-fight interview that he still has a couple more fights left in him. So I mean, I don't think he has any plans to retire. Possibly, that's a big money fight, with a winner of Porter Spence, which I have tickets to, which I can't wait for.
Nice.
Yeah, that's Staples. So, I think he said he was going to be there. He's going to try to be there in the crowd. So, I'm pretty sure they're going to, whoever wins that fight, they're going to put him up, invite Manny to the center of the ring and, probably start to preview or promote the next, fight, unification, or further unification. But I think Pacquiao's going to kind of do what he wants to do. I think he didn't, even though he got hit a lot in that fight, I didn't really see him hurt in that fight against Thurman. So I mean, there could be a little bit of a reverse confidence that's happening in the sense that, hey, I'm older. I just won, and I knocked down, and I didn't get hurt, even though he landed punches on me. And this guy's, 10 years younger than me. So, hey, maybe I can, his legacy is already cemented, but these guys want to keep on doing greater and greater and greater things. He probably wants to go down as one of the best boxers of all time. And he's already one of the best boxers of this generation, and he's definitely Hall of Fame, and he has all kinds of accolades. Thurman is a little different story because I still would love to see him fight Spence and get his ass whooping for ducking him all this time, because I don't believe all that talk about, I'm not afraid to lose my O and blah blah blah. Like if that was true, you would have fought Spence a long time ago. I mean, Spence was going through your mandatories when you should have been fighting him. So I don't know that he's like I said before, I think his power is overrated. I think he's a front runner. I don't think that he finishes fights very well. He doesn't seem to, push hard enough. So I think he might have hit his peak of potential. I'm not going to say he's a journeyman, but he's still as far as welterweights, he's still up there. But I think he loses a lot of fights to the top guys, and it doesn't. Maybe he's not motivated to keep on going on. If he's making money and he's smart about it, he can. He doesn't have to keep on fighting, and it doesn't sound like he wants to go and like Pacquiao or any of these other older guys. He doesn't want to go that far. He sounds like he's pretty close to the end of his career.
I'll read a couple of comments here in the chat. Quantum says he totally disagrees. Says there's one legacy enhancing fight for Manny, and should he win, it undoubtedly puts him in the greatest of all time, and that is Spence. No, no fight will put Manny at the greatest of all times because he's not the greatest of all times, be it Spence or anyone else. Sorry to say. Um, that's first off, and two. At this stage of his career, I don't know if the powers that be will put Manny in there with the likes of Spence. Christian NWO says that Pacquiao Thurman was a great fight. He would like to see them fight again. This could be another trilogy under Pacquiao's legacy. The problem is, Christian, is that again, at this stage of his career, 40-year-old Pacquiao uh, doesn't need to. Why would he put him in a why would he put himself in a position to fight a trilogy with Thurman? To put his body under that kind of stuff, under that kind of stress, physical and mental, uh, in there with a Thurman. Thurman, as far as I'm concerned, he has to get a couple more fights under his belt to earn a fight with Pacquiao. And by the time he does that, Pacquiao could be retired. Um, Quantum also said that uh, I can't believe what I heard, what I'm hearing. Everybody is clamoring for Spence and Thurman. Was anybody worried about Thurman's health? I tend to agree with you there. Um, Thurman's main weakness, as far as I'm concerned, is he can't take body shots. Spence, one of his strengths is his ability to fight inside and his ability to go to the body. Uh, Collazo hurt Thurman up the gut. There were times where I think Sean Porter troubled Thurman up the gut. We just saw Pacquiao hurt Thurman up the gut with a single shot. Spence is he's a nightmare for Thurman. Jacob just said it. He said he would want that fight to happen just so Thurman can get his ass whooped for ducking him all these years. There it is. Thurman has been ducking him for years. I don't care what he said in the lead up. I don't think under any. The only reason I think that fight will happen is if he were to cash out. And coming off of this loss, he's not in a position to cash out in a fight versus Spence because again, he has to get some fights to put him in a position where he could make a bunch of money. Um, he talked A side before the fight. Well, he's definitely B side now, and so that reason one, two, just from a style, physicality standpoint, Thurman don't want it. He don't want it against Spence. I don't care what anybody says. Thurman fanboys, Thurman stands, or likewise. He don't want a fight with Errol Spence. Point blank, period. Unless he makes a whole bunch of money. And at this point, there's not a whole bunch of money for him to make versus a fight with Errol Spence. Because there's not, the fight ain't going to happen. Quantum, you asked, where's Gus from Corruption in Boxing? Yeah, he did break it down. Unfortunately, he's not on the show tonight. Hopefully, we'll have him on again shortly. Comments, folks, to the questions, comments posed in the chat. Your reaction.
Michael, you speak for me. Thurman wants no part of Spence, none. And that's okay. Well, he's if he wants fights, if he wants a few more fights before he cashes out, credit to Thurman for this. To put on a fight that good and exciting means the winner has to have a good dance partner, just like Hooker and Ramirez this weekend. Pacquiao doesn't have that great performance without Keith Thurman pushing him. So Thurman is still a guy a lot of people want to see, is worth seeing. He's the one that's going to need to decide, is his heart and mind really, really in it? He's a very thoughtful, intelligent guy. And when you really think about what you've got to do in this sport and what can happen to you, and he's certainly seen it, as we'll discuss, I think that works against somebody, as smart and thoughtful as he is. So maybe he has one or two more fights, but you are right. It is not Errol Spence. And there's enough rising talent in the welterweight division and guys at 140 who might want to think about moving up. Errol Spence is not going to, he is not going to suffer for opponents. That's not a concern.
Daniel, Jacob, your reactions to the questions and the comments on the live chat right now.
Well, as far as this whole Spence situation, if you're looking for Pacquiao, that's not the career definer. He has enough. He has enough already career defining victories. You could just build that off the whole fact that he fought Barrera, Morales, and Marquez. So he doesn't really need a legacy something. His legacy is already set. But as far as what's gone for both of them, that's the difficult part. That is the very, very difficult part. Because for Pacquiao, we know the end game. We know what the end game is going to be. It's the nightmare scenario. It's the rematch with Floyd. Even though the only people that want to see it are Pacquiao and Mayweather's accountants, it looks like that is the collision course that we're heading into. And it's going to give me a headache. And unfortunately, what makes it even worse, they try to rush it because you know they're going to try to rush it. It's the fact that Canelo gave up the September date this year. So that's one area. Thurman is a very interesting scenario because it wasn't a situation like the Browne fight where Browne just looked out class against Pacquiao. And with Thurman, no, he gave his all. Like in the second half of the fight, he showed why those scorecards were that close. The picture that's going to be, though, is what can you do to rebuild him? Because all of the other players may be tied, like you mentioned. Like, I agree with you guys. He doesn't want any part of Spence. And rematching Porter's are an option because he's playing Spence. Rematching Danny Garcia doesn't make much sense without a title.
Your mic, keep talking, Daniel, but I'm just letting you know, your mic sounds a little bit kind of cloudy. Unfortunately, hopefully you can get some things later, but continue to make your point.
All right. So, like I said, there's very little fun Danny Garcia. We all kind of laugh when the idea of Jesse Vargas got done around. And that's what makes it difficult when it comes to the welterweights, when it comes to the PCL, because the only other fight that could make me think maybe he's ready, or maybe he wants to get the legacy is Bud. And unfortunately, I don't care what Bud says. As far as I'm not across the street, I'm here. As far as I'm concerned, you're not even across the street. You're across the ocean.
I mean, yeah. The fact that they didn't even put Bud's image up there and mention that he's a champion, that was cold on. That was rude. That was rude.
Even though I will admit, the point that he made is a point that a lot of boxing fans have made when it comes particularly to WBO. Like, there's a reason that in the UK, WBO is called the Warren Boxing Organization, and in the US, sometimes it's called World Bob's Organization. Like, there's a legitimate trend there, but at the same time, I forgot, there are a couple of PBC guys who are WBO champs or who are in line to be WBO champs.
Yeah, Andrade is one of them.
Yeah, no, he's not PBC though.
No, I'm sorry. Andrade is DAZN. My bad. I'm thinking of someone else.
Yeah, but there's enough guys in the ranking system that you don't have to climb the WBO to do it. Now, but that's the difficult thing with Thurman, and it's a difficult thing with all of the young welterweights, because especially those at the PBC, because no one is going to try to be the rehab.
I'm thinking Ruiz. Yeah, Ruiz is a WBO champ. Yeah.
Yeah, Ruiz is PBC, but that's like you can't make an exception when you have the heavyweight champion as backing into it. But either way, when it comes to the PBC guys, nobody really wants to be the other guy's rehab fight or the comeback fight. Especially now when the meal ticket is a match with Manny for the next 2 years. Or who even knows? The winner of the rematch between Manny and Floyd, which, like I said, as much as we don't want to see it, as much as how cringeworthy the first fight became, it's one of those fights that looks worse as time goes on. And I didn't think I would ever have the situation where you had a Pacquiao fight or a Mayweather fight just look worse as the years went on, but this one's it. It's difficult to really see outside the nightmare scenario, unfortunately for them. That's why I feel bad for Thurman in a way. Like, but I'll admit though, he took his loss with class. He didn't try to make any excuses. He just said, he even said, if a guy's better than me, he has to beat me, and Pacquiao beat me.
Quickly, Jacob. Pacquiao, Thurman. Where do each fighter go from here?
I think I kind of already hit on it earlier, but I could see a scenario though where Thurman signs a fight with Spence, and then miraculously he gets an injury or hurts, but he can say, "Oh yeah, I was gonna fight him, but I got a shoulder injury or hand injury, so it didn't happen." But again, I don't think Pacquiao's gonna retire. He's gonna still fight. Thurman seems like he's on his last. Maybe he's trying to cash out and get a rematch with Pacquiao if he can, or maybe if Porter miraculously wins, stranger things that happen, then maybe he tries to get a fight with Porter, a rematch with him because they had a really good first fight. So
a couple more comments in the chat. First of all, shout out to What You Need. He's joined us live in the YouTube chat. Denise said that Crawford would bury Thurman. She said Thurman would get smashed by Spence, period. Quantum said that folks worried about Pacquiao's health and wish for him to retire. Folks need to stop cherry picking about who they are worried about. Well, I'm a back Gail here in her earlier commentary. This is kind of going to delve in the news portion a bit here. One, Pacquiao has done so much. He has so little to prove at this point. You would assume he has enough coin in the bank. It would be nice for him to retire. Rather be safe than sorry, given what has occurred over the past week or so. You don't want anybody damaged, short or long term. And so when people suggest or make the argument that, they would like to see Pacquiao call it a day, I'm not going to push back against that. I can certainly understand that. So respectfully, you can call it cherry picking and whatnot. You have your point, and I'm not going to say you outright wrong. But for those who express concern about Pacquiao at this stage, they're not exactly wrong either. Um, let's move on. And officially, yeah, would I like to see Pacquiao retire? The call of the day, cool. But if he wants to go on and fight, I can understand that too because he's still one of the best in the world. Um, Spence, I don't know. I don't think he'll beat Spence. Crawford, I don't think he'll beat him either. However, there are still fights out there for him to make money. Garcia, um, most notably, and he, he's not going to listen to us anyway. So it's ultimately up to him. Let's move on to some other. Let's move on to. Let's move on. Let's continue the theme and talk about a couple more fights that took place 2 weeks ago. Teofimo Lopez, excuse me, fought an IBF lightweight eliminator against a Japanese fighter by the name of Nakatani. Lopez won, but to many, and I will go to you, Jacob, go back to you. A lot of people felt that Lopez may have been quote unquote exposed. Lopez, a young hot shot in the 135 division, in the lightweight division, is already talking about a fight with Lomachenko. Well, this fight against Nakatani, who is probably a little bit better than a lot of us thought coming in, this fight showed that whatever you want to think about uh, Loma, at this point, the Teofimo that we saw, he's not beating Loma. Your reaction to Teofimo's fight against Nakatani?
It was again, I think the kid has talent, but I also think that his rise might be happening a little bit too fast, and he's trying to maybe grow up a little bit too fast. He has obviously some personal issues that he's dealing with his internal family. His dad, has all the confidence in the world in him, and he seems to be super confident. But I'll tell you one thing right now: he better watch out for that. He shouldn't even be thinking about Lomachenko. He should be thinking about Comey, because that's a tough fight. I don't care what anybody says. That Comey is going to give him all he can handle, and I think Comey can win that fight. So he shouldn't be looking past Comey and thinking about when he's going to fight Lomachenko and whether he's ready for Lomachenko. He's got to be focused on the fight that's in front of him. And he got hit a lot in that fight, and he kind of reminds me a lot of Prograis in the sense where I think they both have talent, but I both think that they talk a lot like they're better than they are. I think there's still some definite refinement that they need to do, but they're both they're still young, so unfortunately there's this rush to get through your career and get a championship fight, and that seems to be like the newer themes, and maybe it's because Lomo, even though he had a vast amateur career, all this thing of how many fights did I have before I won a championship, and then I won my second championship and all that stuff. You got to be more careful with your career. Than that. You got to be a little bit more thoughtful than that. You want to build off your wins. You want to learn from your mistakes, and you'll get your opportunities to fight for the belt. But you don't want to be in one of those fights where you're biting off more you can chew, and then it kind of ruins your career. You're in a brutal fight that you never bounce back from.
I'll go to you, Gail and Daniel. Your reaction to Teofimo Lopez struggling a bit against Nakatani?
I'm not troubled by it. As guys rise up the ranks, they need fights like this. They need to go rounds. When you've got a hot ticket young prospect and you make it easy for them, they look good, they have these flashy, quick knockouts, but when they don't get some muscle memory and some ring time in, not in sparring, not in the gym, sometimes they are in for a rude awakening when they really finally face talent on their level. So this doesn't trouble me, and it's the best possible thing to get Lopez's mind right, make him realize, if I want to do all the things I can do, and I think I can achieve, I need to put the work in, and I need to focus, and I need to get the distractions away from me. And everybody, let's remember how young he is. We're not talking about a 25 or a 30-year-old guy. We're talking about a 21-year-old, 22? Not an issue. You're going to have fights like this. He should have fights like this at this level. No shame in it. No real reason for concern until we see him starting to slip again. Then we can sound the alarm bells, but not yet.
Your reaction, Daniel?
This is the fights that guys that are highly touted and that are pushing the fast track like Teofimo Lopez need. They need fights where they have to see how they get it out. And luckily they picked out a real tough Japanese fighter to do so. Now, obviously, like you mentioned his dad, you mentioned how his dad's was already pretty much talking shit about the Lomachenko fight, but he has like Jacob mentioned, he has a pretty tough assignment coming up with Richard Comey. Remember, who after being you could argue being cheated out of a title at least twice, or decisions wins at least twice. He's going to come in trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. And that has to be what's in Teofimo's mind. That has to be what is in his team's mind. Because if it's not, then that little rise is not going to happen for a very, very long time. Because should we remind people of one Felix Verdejo, whose star was just rising as high, who, granted, he did not have, Lopez doesn't have as much hype or as much legacy, but as Verdejo had. We have to remember Verdejo was touted for many people as being the heir to Tito Trinidad. But the same thing happened, just a couple of bad wins and then maybe a loss, and suddenly all the momentum that you had goes out the window. Lopez could easily fall into that trap. So he better keep his mind right when it comes into this. And hopefully he learns from this fight. Not every fight's going to be easy. Not every fight's going to be a blitz. You're going to have to grind it out. You can win, and you still have to grind it out. And that's going to help you when it comes to making a champion, because Comey is the type of fighter where you have to be. Where you have to be completely on your P's and Q's. So,
go ahead.
No, that was it.
Quantum, he's not holding his tongue here. Said all of a sudden the Teofimo fans are backtracking their expectations. Called him a bunch of cockroaches. He says that the weight bully got bullied by a technically sound fighter. I mean, listen, Teofimo has been talking a lot, and so has his fan base. But I stick to old adage here. The old school adage here is when a fighter has not suffered a loss prior to them fighting them fighting for a title, there's something wrong with that fighter. Well, I'm going to update it a little bit here and say that if a fighter has not gone through some kind of adversity up until they fight for a title, that's a little bit troublesome. That's the stance I'm gonna take here. Teofimo, he had his moment. Nakatani had his moments where he made Teofimo struggle. But if Teofimo is humble enough, if he's humble enough, um, he will look at this fight and say, he will study the film, analyze anything, and hopefully become a better fighter as a result. Do I think he has talent? Yes. Do I think that he can beat Comey? Yes. But all of this talk of him acting like the greatest thing since sliced bread, one, that's what happens when you're dealing with a 21-year-old precocious fighter who's talented and who can punch. Uh, that's what happens. But just because a young fighter talks that way doesn't make them so. And again, you're talking about Lomachenko, who is, whether you feel he's number one pound for pound fighter or not, he is elite. He is elite, and and Teofimo Lopez, he still has some work to do. I was going to recap um, Dillian Whyte and Oscar Rivas, but what I'm going to do is kind of do a recap, turn that into a news segment here, because we're running short on time. Dillian Whyte defeated Rivas by pretty comfortable margin 10 days back over in the UK. Had his way throughout most of the fight, minus round 9, which he got caught and got put down on the deck. He recovered enough to basically outbox Rivas throughout the rest of the fight. A lot of controversy has come up in the aftermath. I'm going to Yu-Gi-Oh! As a report by Thomas Hauser on Boxing Scene, in which, according to his sources, Dillian Whyte tested positive for a PED in the days leading up to the fight. According to Hauser's report, Rivas' camp did not know about it. In the days afterwards, Eddie Hearn and other powers that be basically said that they were given that Dillian Whyte was given the okay for the fight. Eddie Hearn has tweeted that Dillian Whyte was given the okay to fight. A lot of back and forth, Gail. A lot of controversy. Um, and quick word, one more word in the chat here. Jackson the Hopeful, thanks for joining us on the show. Make sure, folks in the chat, make sure to hit that like button and make sure to hit that subscribe button. He says that Lopez, he has to improve in inside gate, and that's what I mean. One of the things that Teofimo has to learn is to fight inside. He's just not a complete fighter yet, and he has to be complete to even think that he can dance with the likes of Loma. But back to Dillian Whyte, Gail. A lot of back and forth word, no really official statement from Vada. Your reaction to the news that has been breaking in the aftermath of Dillian Whyte's win over Oscar Rivas?
Well, props, first of all, to Thomas Hauser for getting the story and being absolutely right once the party's confirmed. The British Boxing Board of Control is the commission that oversees fights in the UK, and the drug testing system used is different. The rules are different. And when somebody is popped, as Whyte was before the fight, they inform the fighter's promoter. There is no rule mandating they inform anyone else, including the other camp, other promoter, is, auntie or anybody else. So according to their rules, they followed protocol. However, if you're Oscar Rivas and his team, Yvonne Michelle, and you lost this fight and then you find this out, you are hopping mad, pissed, outraged, making a lot of noise, going after Whyte, going after Eddie Hearn, and rightfully so, especially given Whyte's previous history and previous suspensions for using performance-enhancing drugs. And here's this guy we have all been propping up, demanding a fight for. He's been languishing for 600 days as a mandatory, getting no fights until we finally have this fight. And then he does this. my head just explodes when I hear stuff like this. What the hell is he thinking? It's dismaying. It's disappointing. However this plays out, it's just not good. It's just not good. And I think things like this have the potential for a far more lasting stain than the injuries causing deaths in the ring in many ways. These self-inflicted wounds are the worst. And especially with Whyte, having been popped once, you have to devote your career to being squeaky clean the rest of the way out. And it'll have to be a damn good explanation or excuse for me to be buying it. I'm not really buying what they're selling right now.
Okay, I'm back. I was gonna say keep the I said in the chat, keep the conversation going. I'll go to I had to step away right quick. I'll go to you, Daniel and Jacob. Your reaction to all the news that has broke in the aftermath of Dillian Whyte's win over Oscar Rivas.
Oh, where to begin with this? First, we have to remind people this is the second time that Dillian Whyte apparently has popped. The first one mentioned in 2012, went up from the suspension for 2 years. And there's enough conflicting or contradictory information to push the notion that this involved a lot of people. Now, Gail can correct me, or anyone can correct me now. As far as I understand it, they popped 2 or 3 weeks before the fight. The British Boxing Board of Control wanted the fight canceled, but the UK anti-doping group did not want it and actually superseded them, if I'm correct. That's one. Two, even though this technically was a WBC title eliminator fight, they did not even go through the WBC or through the VADA program. They let UCAT going into which, if I'm correct, Oscar Rivas' team wasn't even notified that Dillian Whyte popped. So they let the fight continue knowing this. And as far as I know, we have to thank actually our good friend EJ Boxing Live for this. Apparently one of the Sky Sports people, Spencer Fearon, is actually accusing now Oscar Rivas of failing the drug test. It seems to me like this entire case is probably the UK boxing people trying to cover their tracks. Or trying to cover themselves a bit. Because if Dillian Whyte popped for a banned substance, that could have easily removed the sanction from the WBC, which would make the fight meaningless in a sense. And unfortunately, because of the Anthony Joshua fight with Ruiz, that would pretty much leave almost no major footprint in the UK boxing scene for a stake at the World Championship other than Joe Joyce. That's not a good situation to be in right now when it feels like now like an entire country or entire countries like boxing areas covering up their area.
I'm not going to make that leap because that's going to assume that one Ruiz beats Joshua in the rematch. That also assumes second that Wilder defeats Fury when they fight again, and I'm not ready to jump to go there. Not yet.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm not looking at the future. I'm looking at it as what it is right now. Where it is right now is Andy Ruiz is the heavyweight champion of the world. Right now, Tyson Fury seems more intent on gaining an American audience over than maintaining the British audience. So that's what I mean. Like, they're pretty barren right now. But we have to remember, this also has a little bit of shade to the Tyson Fury situation, where he apparently popped for a test, and then, like I said, it became an entire mess unto itself. What makes this worse is the fact that, like I said, this is the second time for Dillian.
Yeah.
He lost 2 years out of his career the first time, from 2012 to 2014. And if you do this again, right as you're at the cusp of an actual world title shot, that's pretty bad. And it also kind of falls into a weird pattern that you're seeing, interestingly enough, with a lot of mandatory challengers, with the only exception right now probably being Dominic Brazil, of guys that were mandatory to Deontay Wilder, who people wanted to see, are people that people thought that Wilder could easily lose to, them popping. Like, should we remind people of Alexander Povetkin? How that happened mere weeks before the fight? Or the entire debacle that was how the Luis Ortiz situation was handled? And now you have this? That's a pretty dark telling tale that you feel a lot of guys that are lined up to face this one guy who, we have to admit, everybody can admit that you could pretty much outbox because of how late of a bloomer he is. But there must be something about it when almost everybody that's any major consequence finds themselves in a doping violation.
And not only that, is Dillian Whyte has been very open about making similar accusations about one Anthony Joshua, including in the lead up to his fight, basically saying that one of the reasons that Joshua looked so subpar against Ruiz is because he was not fighting in the UK and he was not getting quote unquote protective. So all around, this is a bad look for one Dillian Whyte. I go to you, Jacob. Your reaction to the news about Dillian supposedly, reportedly, I should say, failing a drug test.
So maybe you guys can educate me. So I know that they typically take two samples, right? The A sample and the B sample. Now, if you fail the A sample but the B sample comes back negative, is that considered a confirmed failed test?
Are you? Your thought, is that true, Gail? I thought if the A sample was positive, but the B sample was negative, that would kind of negate things.
That's correct. They both got a match. They both got a pop. They don't have to be exactly the same, but you have an A sample and a B sample to confirm. Yeah. As long as they're both handled correctly and chain of custody is proper. But
is the B sample been returned? Is it already confirmed?
Not, and I have to admit, I have not looked at any news today, so I'm a little loath to talk about whether it's been returned yet. And I'm sorry, I have a dog barking because I have a coyote situation behind my house right now. But that's what it would take, is for both to go. What's so frustrating about this, in addition to Dillian Whyte having been popped and now he's getting popped again. It is the difference in the notification rules in Great Britain. The fact that the opponent didn't need to be told. That it just, if I'm Andy Ruiz and his team or Deontay Wilder and his team, and I'm watching this going on and think I could potentially walk into a fight where a fighter tested dirty and I don't necessarily have to be told about it, I would refuse to go to the UK for a fight unless VADA testing was involved. Now, let's make it clear. This was not VADA testing. This was domestic UK testing. Very different story. VADA is the gold standard. If I was a British fighter looking at USADA testing, for example, I'd be just as unhappy with that. They've all got question marks other than VADA, which has proven itself to be trustworthy over the years. So in theory, yes, if the A sample tests dirty and the B sample comes back and confirms, that's the story. And I am checking this right now to check our news.
Yeah, it does not look like it's the case. I don't think they've tested it yet because apparently they try to clear it up through a hearing.
Yeah, doesn't look like it, but we're talking about UCAD, testing. UCAD is the British equivalent of USADA, not VADA. VADA was not involved. So, that's where we stand. We now, apparently have a report floating around today that Jarrell Miller, Big Baby Miller, sent her a message. Miller was popped, testing positive for several banned substances, training to fight Anthony Joshua. He wasn't allowed to fight. That's how Andy Ruiz got the call. So here we have Miller, who wasn't allowed to fight, but Whyte was. So Miller's now raising, a ruckus with Hearn over not being allowed to fight Joshua, yet when it was his fighter, Whyte, the fight was allowed to continue. You know what? This is just a shitstorm of epic proportions. Honest to God, what a mess. The only guys left standing right now are the American fighters who are undefeated, Joshua, whose status is in limbo, but thank God Kubrat Pulev got cleared by the California State Athletic Commission of his assault issue. He has now gone through sexual harassment education training, and he got his license back. So all is fine.
Oh God! Okay, we have to look at the entire situation. This is why I brought up what EJ mentioned, because we have to mention, like I said, a friend of the program, EJ Boxing Live. It's a very difficult thing. Like, EJ doesn't put out things that just for the sake of putting them out. He's not Ellie Seckback, though. We'll put it that way. So when he puts in like a reputable Sky Sports boxing personality, especially for him, he's pretty legitimate as far as Sky Sports is concerned. When you have a guy accusing Oscar Rivas of possibly failing the test, that pretty much tells you how badly this has been covered, and why Ruiz, despite any power dynamic you can actually think of, why Ruiz put out that tweet saying, "Yeah, I'm not fighting in the UK."
That's a lie, because Eddie Hearn is about to go to him with an offer to fight within Cardiff, and given the money that I've heard he's been offered, he'd be a fool. He would be a fool to turn that down. I don't care if it is in overseas.
It doesn't matter to me if it's overseas. Like I'll admit that it's just mainly the principle of it. Now he'll accept it if it's money, but it kind of shows you the notion that you have. Like I mentioned it, for years this has been an issue in Great Britain where whether it's doping violations or dubious decisions, there seems to be a general feeling that when it comes to the UK and you're facing a UK fighter, if you're not from the UK, you might get burned by a little bit of home cooking. Should we remind people of the debacle that the Billy Joe Saunders versus Akabov fight was? Where Akabov clearly won that fight, but somehow Billy Ho won. Somehow Willie Ho got the decision in the UK. Or that's the first one that pops into my mind. So there's a situation there in the UK that can't be handled now. Big Baby, that situation is pretty funny to me because that was VADA popping it twice. Like Gail mentioned, that is the gold standard. That is not like I said, that's the standard when it comes to
Twice. He did it didn't he do it like 3 times?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Miller got popped, and it was without question verified. Whyte's is still a little bit fuzzy. The difference here is that Whyte's got the history behind him. He's already tested dirty in the past. So if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and so on.
Yeah, and like in Miller's case, guess what? If you're gonna complain the whole cooking, your home state's athletic commission, the one that pretty much decided, no, you are not fighting. New York State Athletic Commission. So there's really nothing that he can say in that front, other than the fact that you can say a little bit of hypocrisy on his end because of statements that Eddie Hearn has put out in the past, saying that I forgot what interview he was where he said that people that dope should be banned for life, and that's coming into biting in his face in this one. So this is just a gigantic mess, and it exposes a certain underbelly within British boxing that has to be fixed, particularly in a boxing scene that is as vibrant and full of characters as the UK is. We have a lot of characters changing. You can go as little weights as from, I'll say, Kalia Fai, Josh Warrington, Mikkel Brook, Callum Smith. Like, you have people that are pretty good, well, all over the place. And unfortunately, because this is involving your country's anti-doping agency, there's going to be a cloud hovering about all of their heads, whether they themselves popped or not, especially in fights that involve them staying in the United Kingdom. It's going to come down to something where you may start seeing, within the next 2 or 3 years, you may even start seeing fighters flat out refuse. If this is a change, go out to the UK. It's like, no, you want to fight? No, you got to come to this place. You got to come to this place. I don't trust your country's doping mechanism.
Indeed. So whenever boxing sometimes looks like it's going to be on the up and up, the sport continues to step over itself and trip itself up. The beginning of the episode of tonight's live recording, I said that we talk about boxing when it's good, when it's bad, and unfortunately, when tragedy occurs. During the last episode, which I didn't post until today, was an abbreviated one, talking about the passing of one Pernell Sweet P. Whitaker. Well, in the last week, we've had 2 deaths occurred to boxers who passed away as a result of injuries suffered in the ring on the Lopez Nakatani undercard. You had Russian boxer Maxim Dadishev He collapsed following a 11th round stoppage loss to Sabril Matias. He passed away last week on Tuesday. On Thursday, you had Argentinian boxer Alfredo Santillan. He passed away last week on Thursday in Buenos Aires, Argentina, due to injuries suffered in the ring of a draw against Eduardo Abreu. Dadishev was 29, I believe, and Santillan, young age of 23. First of all, and I'll start the conversation with you, Gail. Talk about the kind of back-to-back passings we suffered from from fighters as a result from injuries, and talk about the debate that has sparked up in the days afterwards about the safeties and ultimately the dangers that come along with the sport that we all cover and love so much.
These two deaths coming so close together remind us that we are fans. We are engaged in supporting what is a dangerous sport. It is a risky sport to participate in. These two gentlemen were in the ring in tough fights, suffered injury. There wasn't any obvious wrong. Finally, in the Dadishev case, trader Buddy McGirt did stop the fight, even when Dadishev did not want to have the fight stopped. Could he have stopped it a few rounds earlier? Yes. Would it have made a difference? We will never know. Dadishev did get medical attention fairly quickly. It didn't make much of a difference. The damage was done. Santillan, I know a little less about what happened there. Clearly very similar injuries. And it happens in boxing. So the question in my mind was, how much does it happen? And how much dangerous is boxing really than some of the other things that human beings pursue? You know, a lot of human beings by their nature are adventurous, are thrill seekers. We would never have gone to the moon 50 years ago without taking a lot of human risks. And you can say, you know, risking going to the moon is a little bit different than risking in the ring, but it's still the behavior that fuels it. So looking back at the statistics, which are not difficult to find, we've had 2 boxer deaths due to ring injuries or outcomes. 2 in each of the last 3 years, if you count these 2. God forbid we have any more. And looking at statistics, I decided to just measure the 21st century. So how many boxing deaths have we had in the ring officially in professional fights since 2000? It's been 24. So it is not quite one and a fraction a year. Call it between 1 and 2 a year. 24. That's sobering and that's regrettable. How does that measure up against other dangerous sports? So I was curious and I pulled the statistics. You can find these. In fact, one of the better sources with it, year by year, line by line, date by date, is Wikipedia. They are all logged in there. They're official sources. So if we had 24 boxers die in the ring since 2000, another sport's had 24 people die. Downhill skiing, 24 people have been killed in competitive downhill skiing, alpine skiing, since 2000. 24 people have also died in competition since 2000, just at the Daytona Speedway. 57 have died during that period at the Indianapolis Speedway alone. Motorsports is tremendously dangerous. MotoGP, motorcycle racing, has had 63 deaths which is frightening. And so on it goes. Then if you start looking at some other sports, believe it or not, measured against boxing's 24 deaths, there have been more deaths in professional cycling, 32, than boxing. Do we all look at professional cycling and think of that as terribly dangerous? It is. It's very dangerous. These are professional road cyclists. They're not out on your, local street getting hit by a car. That's not what we're talking about. There have been more deaths in professional sailing than boxing. This is not to negate that boxing is dangerous. It is. But people do go into boxing fully informed with full consent about what's going to happen to them. And I've heard this said a few times. This is not an original statement from me, but it is so true. Boxing has saved more lives in so many ways than have been lost. That is not to take away from how awful this is to witness for his family, for his team, his trainer, his promoter, everybody involved, the ring physician who I'm sure wonders, could I have done something? The referee, should I have stopped the fight earlier? It's difficult. What do we do about it? Can we make it safer? We can probably make it incrementally safer, but if you are a person who says we need to stop boxing as a sport because it's too dangerous, then you also need to stop sailing, skiing, cycling. Motor racing is far more dangerous. And you also need to stop people climbing Mount Everest. 139 people have died on Mount Everest since 2000. In the same time period, 24 have died from boxing. What are the values we have for each of these pursuits, which are all very dangerous? The one thing we can do is look at practical measures to make it safer. And one thing that fans can do not get up the referee's ass when he stops the fight at what you think is too early. You are not there. You are not looking at the fighter. Do not give guys shit for quitting in the corner. Do not give trainers hell for protecting their fighter. The fighter in the ring has very few friends. Truthfully, the trainer is not necessarily one of them because the fighter pays the trainer. There is a fiduciary relationship there that isn't always the healthiest, particularly if they're family members, which I have a problem with. But the referee is neutral. The ring physician is neutral. If we need to give them more authority, if we need to support them as a community in making the tough calls earlier, I'm sure everybody's noticed in the last 10 days, referees are jumping in just a fraction earlier than they were before. And last night at Hollywood Fight Night in Los Angeles, a card put on by 360 Promotions, Tom Loeffler, who is Gennady Golovkin's promoter, the main event was held up for quite a few minutes because a fighter in the previous bout had been taken to the hospital as a precaution, and there was no ambulance on scene. An ambulance is required. They needed to wait until a replacement got there. Could they have gambled in any other circumstance and said, yeah, we'll just let the main event go on. We can call another one if we need one. No, they did not gamble. They waited. They had to wait about 20 minutes. Well worth the investment of time. Those are the things we can do incrementally, playing by the rules, and the fans need to knock off the bitching and moaning about a fight being stopped too soon. Referees are human. They don't want to take shit from all these people watching. If that ever makes a referee hesitate for 1 second and puts a guy in danger, that's on us, and we need to knock it off. And I've said my piece.
I'll go to you, Daniel. But first, shout out to Lisa who joined us in the chat. She also mentioned the dangers of football, American football, for those who are listening live. Overseas, particularly in Europe, she's talking about American football, which, as stats would say, as the stat says, is the most physically demanding sport on the human body. I'll go to you, Daniel, and then you can follow up and kind of close the conversation off. Jacob, your reaction to the sudden and tragic loss of life that we had to deal with from fighters and injuries suffered in the ring.
This is the other side of the coin of being a fan in boxing. You gotta love the knockouts. You gotta love the theatrics, the overall stories that are told in the ring. Those stories, unfortunately, turn out to be tragedies in a lot of cases. And the first, I can't pronounce that guy's name, unfortunately, for the life of me right now. Dadishev, there we go. That one felt really bad because you kind of felt in the beginning that Buddy McGurk did stop it in time. And ultimately, it was a little bit too late. I don't know about the situation in Argentina, but it's a similar tale, unfortunately. Now, Gail did point out and said there's a lot of deaths in a lot of sports. And like you mentioned in the chat, yeah, American football is a very, very dangerous sport, particularly in this day and age where it doesn't look like there's really a legitimate off season.
Yeah,
for a lot of people.
And excuse me for chiming in. If you want to, the folks who are have an outcry over the sport now, I want to see that same outcry / outrage at the NFL for the sheer notion of trying to add 2 additional regular season games, in effect, which will cause, in effect, even further damage to the human body and to the head. Proceed.
Yeah, and if we let's talk American football for a little bit. Okay, a lot of we have to relay the fact, and we have to relay a little bit of history. A lot of the reasons why, like even people like Lennox Lewis mentioned it, that we have seen like a gap in American heavyweight boxing. It's mainly because a lot of the people that would have won the beat boxers went to the NFL instead, where they can use the same athleticism, they can use the same thing, just in a different sport. But the problem is you're dealing with a sport now in American football where the actual equipment that is supposed to be the safeguard against injury was in effect for a long time turned into weapons. Mainly the helmet. And now that's coming back to bite people. But here's the legitimate difference between all of those, besides American football, besides some of the sports that you mentioned, Gail, with possibly the exception of skiing. And we have to thank the X Games for it. Boxing is probably the only major sport in all of those sports that you mentioned where the specific job is to hurt the other human being. And in downhill skiing, a lot of times you're by yourself. Accidents happen a lot in that sport. In cycling, a lot of it's collision sports, but your main job is not to collide with another cyclist. In boxing, no, your job is to hurt the other person that is across from you in the ring. And that's a tough thing to measure. And we live still in this day and age where we have to have a lot of bravado in fighters going into it. Like, should we talk about like the latest UFC star to be, Jorge Masvidal? He's been talking mess because he got the quickest knockout in UFC history. But at this stage, it's almost impossible to measure up. If you stop the fights, if you feel like you've stopped the fights a little bit too early, you feel like you might have robbed fans of a specific moment. If you stop the fights too late, you wind up with these situations where instead of talking about a guy like, okay, he lost, he can come back, we're talking about an obituary for him. And that is legitimately sad. That is very, very, very sad to consider. Because that's the end of the sport. This is what a lot of these guys really sign up for. They know that they can legitimately die in there. And I think that's probably one of the things also, like when we see guys talking about that, we tend to produce more of a flashback or pushback. Like we meant when I forget which fight, which I think was it the Brazil fight where Deontay Wilder was talking about
Yeah, he's talking
he
about
wanted to catch a body.
Yeah, it was a Brazil fight.
Yeah, and the pushback to me wasn't so much about the comments that he said, is the chance that it is in a sport where that is a legitimate outcome. And that's what makes it very, very scary when it comes to being a fan of the sport. And in some cases, like in MMA, like the major thing that I think that MMA does a little bit better than boxing is at the first sign of major trouble, those referees stop it. They have to at a certain point. However, it's also, you don't give a lot of, they do let a lot of times people go in a little bit too late. Like with Cyborg and Amanda Nunez, they let Cyborg still continue for a while, even though she was being knocked down, and you could tell she wanted to go on her knees before she got knocked out by Nunez. There's a similar situation when it comes to boxing, and it's almost a situation where you can't really, and I mean really fully 100% of the risk you can't take out of the sport until medical technology reaches a point where we can have like a brain scan between every round. And we're probably at least a century before that's even a possibility.
I'll go to you, Jacob. Kind of sum up this conversation, as sad as it is.
Yeah, I mean it's very sad, especially when somebody loses their life, doing providing entertainment for us, and I love the sport of boxing, and I'm never not gonna love the sport of boxing. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I like the brutality of some of the fights that I've seen, whether it's been live or on TV, and just how much I know that these guys put into it, and I know it takes a little bit of piece of them, as they're fighting. So, I respect them for that. And, you know, and I continue to, try to go to as many fights as I can and, promote boxing and talk about boxing and, look at old fights and just, honor it because I think it's a great sport. I think Gail said a lot of, great points, and she's a lot more elegant than I am when talking, and she's been around the sport for a long time. So she I think she's very tuned into what what the world is feeling, especially this story. I don't know too much about the Argentinian kid, but with Max, it's you.
Well, that was particularly distressing for those who have not seen it. I'm not going to say where to find it, but it's out there. If you do find it, I'll just give you a trigger warning beforehand. With Santillan, they were in the ring getting ready to announce the decision, and you could tell that he was in distress, was barely able to stand up. He was wobbly legged, and as soon as the draw was announced, his legs became even more wobbly, collapsed in the ring, and even the guy he was fighting, his opponent, was looking at the whole situation. Um, the distress on his face was visible because you could tell by watching him that he was looking at the Santillan and was like, something is wrong here. And then, yeah, he collapsed right after the draw was announced, and the medical guys came in. But the argument, more than legit argument, particularly in hindsight, given the distress that he had in his face and in his body, why did they allow him to even stand there for the decision? He was in such trouble that he was in obvious trouble afterwards, and they should have took him to the back into the hospital. But yeah, that's the kind of the backstory on that. Continue on, Jacob.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I haven't seen it, and I don't know if I'm gonna necessarily search it out. Not knowing the result. But with Max, it's what was sad is that the guy's fighting. He has a young, I think, daughter and his wife, and trying to win a championship over him so he can build a life for him in the U.S. The American dream, and unfortunately, that was cut short. And again, in watching the fight, it's just one of those weird things where I've seen way, way, way more brutal fights than that. I'm not saying it wasn't a tough fight, but I've seen fighters take a lot more, and what appeared to me a lot more damage. So I think that's been the weirdest thing about this whole situation is that Buddy McGirt, God bless him, man, for what he did.
Yeah,
He stepped in, and he said it so perfectly when he was talking about it. He said, "I'd rather Max be mad at me for a couple days than for the rest of his life." Like I mean, he being a former boxer, being a trainer, he just inducted into the Hall of Fame. He knows. I mean, he knows he did the right thing. He's really looking out for his fighters. But I mean, I'm sure there's some guilt there that he feels, and even Max's opponent, because the guy ultimately died, and there's always going to be those questions. Could I have done something? Could I have done it sooner? Maybe the refs and whatever. But in watching that fight, it wasn't like I had seen, Max was fighting back, and like I said, I've seen more brutal stuff, and there was really no signs that it was going to lead to a death, and so that's I think the weird thing about it. That's where you kind of, at least for me, I have some conundrum, with myself, and the saying, hey, do I want them to make do I want them to change the sport, dramatically? And even if they do, is that going to change, you know, the deaths, and I think, Gell did a good job of illustrating, other sports that have more or just as many deaths as boxing. And, when it rains, it pours. I mean, we just happen to have, Pernell Whitaker get hit, by, a car, not even, boxing related, just you've been walking in the street and you got, there was an accident and you got hit and he died. And then you got these two boxers that died, from ring injuries. And, it just, you know, it's sad. But at the end of the day, I don't want the sport to change too much. I'm not saying I want people to die or get hurt, but it is what the elements of the sport are, what it's made of, and it's what fascinates me about the sport. And I think most boxers know what they're getting themselves into, and I've heard many boxers say it in the ring or even in interviews. Hey, we're risking our lives, by being in the ring, and it hasn't been more evident than as right now, with after these two deaths. So I hope they make things safe, of course, but I also don't, again, I'm conflicted. I don't want it to change too much where it doesn't become the sport that I love. But again, I hope, I'm sure the family's not listening, but, I just wish them, the best. And, and this is even a subset to the boxers that, like I think was his name, Pritchard Cologne, and those guys that have gotten brain damage from fights. They didn't die, but in a sense they did die. because they're, trying to learn how to walk and talk and just be a person again. So there are those other things. So it doesn't, sometimes it's not just death. It's these damages that happen to these fighters, but it's a very sad thing.
I think there's a fund in the process to cover the expenses for Dadishev. Me, myself, and I
Yes.
in the chat said that there was an article posted on Boxing Scene in which there's a lawsuit planned. There's a lawsuit that's going to be filed over Dadishev's death,
Yes.
in
Yes.
which
I actually just read about this.
there's a contention that Maxim had medical issues prior to the fight. Um, as you said, Jacob, I can't add any more to what I've heard from you, from Gail, and from Daniel, and I'm not going to try. Um, I want to thank each of you for your deep, profound insight, as well as the comments in the chat regarding the subject. I mean, listen. As some know, I do write for Three Kings Boxing. Uh, 2K and Bo are both who are the heads of basically Three Kings Boxing. They both were amateur fighters, and in the aftermath of this, they talked about it is sad, it is unfortunate, but as fighters, you have the mentality that you kind of sign up for this, and the moment you step in the ring, either in an actual fight or in sparring, that the possibility of this can come. In short, your life is on the line every time you step inside the ropes. Um, Not excusing it, but it just is what it is when you sign up for this. Just like the same thing in any kind of physical contact sport, or even a sport like baseball, where you can get hit with a pitch and your career is over and your life is on the line. Um, the only thing I hope for, well, one of the things I hope for in the aftermath is not just all safety measures be taken, but uh, uh, there's in effect a push for uh, insurance coverage for fighters, because they're the ones who are at the most risk. Um, so yes, a tough subject to talk about, but it needs to be discussed. Once again, thank everybody here for your comments. Thank for all the comments in the chat. Thank for all the condolences given out in the boxing community, in social media. And again, I for Gail, for Daniel, for Jacob, we here at Pound for Pound Boxing Reports certainly send our condolences um, to the family, to the friends, to the loved ones of one Maxim, Dadishev, and Hugo Santillan. May both fighters rest in power. Let's move on. As tough as it is to move on, let's move on to preview some fights for the weekend. Two main fights I want to go talk about. Fights taking place Saturday. I'm going to you, Gail, because the first fight I'm about to mention features one of your favorites. As
Don't judge me,
you
everybody.
you
Do
you
not
t-
judge.
Hey! I could be trolling you right now and talking about Chavez Jr. making his return to the ring.
Oh,
Um,
I know it.
but
He's fighting for a free buffet.
pretty much,
Oh,
pretty
Yep.
much.
For
um,
the CC's heavyweight championship.
yes.
yeah. These two fights I'm talking about going to happen on the same card in New York on Fox, as Kownacki, promising heavyweight, a lot of pop in his punches. He's going to fight one of your favorite fighters, Gail, Chris Arreola. Arreola is once again on the comeback trail. How much of a shot do you give him?
Oh, not much, honestly. Um, yep, Chris, the Nightmare Areola, always wanted to be the first Mexican American heavyweight champion. And he tried, and he had his spots, and he had his moments, and he got close, and he got blown out. He's kind of making one last go of it at age 38, but Andy Ruiz got there before he did. Before there was an Andy Ruiz, there was a Chris Arreola, right? And there are those of us in Southern California, we just can't help ourselves. It's like that guilty pleasure, trashy food that you go eat that you shouldn't, or those songs that you love that are just, pure dreck, and you don't care. You just love that stuff anyway. And Arreola kind of falls in this category for me. We've all got one guilty pleasure fighter, right? He's mine. I would think unless he gets a really spectacular win over the younger, fresher Kownacki, he's done. Does he have a chance? Sure he does. These are two really big guys. You can see a lot of boxer in the ring. You see a lot of padding. You're going to see a lot of jiggling going on. They're fairly evenly matched, body weight size. And for once, it looks like Arreola is, fairly well trained. But, he is the prototype for the big guy, a lot of padding, who's strong, who can carry the weight, who just simply, has no reason to and shouldn't trim down. It doesn't help him at all. Arreola fights best when he's up in the 240s, and believe me, he's not as tall as Anthony Joshua. He is a Ruiz-shaped fighter. Kownacki is Polish-born, but grew up in Brooklyn. A lot of New York fans. It'll be his house on Saturday. He's a friend and stablemate of Big Baby Miller. And I always wanted to see Adam and Jarrell fight each other. It just never come to pass, whether they've agreed not to do it or I don't know what's happened. Of course, now we've got Miller's situation. Kownacki's undefeated. He has skills. He's not elite. He's not in the top tier. But he could certainly advance his cause with a really good showing this weekend. And you know what? It's not a bad matchup. It's really not. I do hope, given the atmosphere around the deaths that have occurred, that the referees, the ring physician, everybody keeps a really close eye on both these guys, but especially Arreola. He has been through some wars, and he just doesn't need to take a whole lot more punishment before he calls his career to a halt. So we'll see what happens. I do think it'll be entertaining. Back to something Jacob said earlier, admitting that, he's seen some of those brawls, crazy hard fights, it's exciting. And I've certainly seen those. You think of Bradley Provodnikov, you think of, Corrales Castillo, you think of more recently Salido Vargas. But I will say, as I've gotten to be an older fight fan, I'm losing my taste for that stuff. I'll tolerate it for a couple of rounds. Hooker Ramirez was kind of my limit, honestly. I less and less enjoy seeing that, knowing what they're doing to each other. And I don't require that to entertain me. And back to a discussion earlier in the show as well, Tevin Farmer got some real heat for not bringing the heat, for not banging in the ring. And his attitude is, wait a minute, I'm still winning. I'm fighting with skill. The fact that you don't particularly love this is not my problem. My job is to win, and I'm winning, and I can do it without getting hurt. That's what I'm going to do. I do think we all need to develop a little more appreciation for that. That was something that Pernell Whitaker could do, and a lot of the great fighters through the years can do. So, it's going to take, in addition to some of the other measures, professionally speaking in the ring, perhaps we as fans can adjust. We all adjusted when championship fights went from 15 rounds to 12. I'm amazed that you hear people still from time to time say, well, we need to bring back 15-round fights. Oh, hell no, you don't. No. That's the kind of thing that makes the sport unnecessarily dangerous. So we're going to see 12 or less this week. between these two big guys. I hope that everybody has a good, clean, hard fight without it becoming dangerous. We'll see what happens.
Your thoughts on Kownacki and Arreola, Jacob?
I don't have too much more to add. I mean, probably be pretty entertaining fight. I'm gonna go against Arreola. I think he's just kind of he's on the backhand of his career. So I mean, I don't expect too much more from him. I think his days of fighting for championship and relevance is over, and I think he kind of knows that. But he's going to continue to fight, I guess, as long as he thinks he needs to. I know he has other businesses and whatnot. I think bars and taco places and stuff like that. So hopefully he's invested smartly, and hopefully those businesses are doing good, so he doesn't have to go longer than he should. But yeah, Arreola will put on there'll be some entertaining rounds where he throws down, but I think he'll lose this one.
For me, I got Kownacki winning anywhere from 6 to 8. It'll be fun while it lasts, but Arreola's too much punishment he suffered during his career, and Kownacki is a pretty large dude himself, who can has enough power to trouble Arreola. I'll go to you, Daniel. Your thoughts?
Well, another chance for Chris Arreola to get back into the relevant picture and have regained. I don't think he'll win this fight, but I'll admit he's an entertaining guy. Like, I met him in 2007. He's a pretty entertaining guy. Can't keep his head up. The situation now is, though, how often are we going to see it? Because this is his third or fourth comeback, and each time it hasn't proven itself to be successful. And at this point, like this type of fight, it suits him well because it's not a contender fight. This is more like a gatekeeper. We want to see if this guy is the goods, and he was serviceable in that front. I just I said, I don't give him a shot. Like, I trolled Gail before the show, what happens if he wins? But in all honesty, I don't think he will.
And I don't disagree with anybody here. I hope he goes out in a blaze of glory, a safe blaze of glory, and knowing Arreola after the fight, he'll walk out and buy beers for everybody who wants to come to the bar with him. He's that kind of guy. So, let's hope we're all safe, that it's a good, clean fight, as they say. But yes, it is a gatekeeper fight. And it's a slow weekend in boxing. So, the fact that this is the marquee fight, along with the other championship fight on the card and the fight card out of Belfast earlier on ESPN in the day, which features Michael Conlon and a lot of Irish boxing talent. That's our lineup for this weekend. It's the dog days of summer, y'all.
Yeah, unfortunately, on the undercard of Kownacki and Arreola, you mentioned, Gail, you want a fun fight, but you don't want anybody to get seriously hurt. That's the same hope I have for this undercard fight between Marcus Browne and Jean Pascal. Listen, Pascal is not the fighter he was, not close to the fighter he was in my eye. While Marcus Browne, as we saw in his fights over oh gosh, the name escapes me, who he beat last time out. Help me out, folks. His name is in my head. Anyway, I'll remember. Anyway, Badu Jack. If that Marcus Browne can, if we see that Marcus Browne in the ring against Pascal, not only will Pascal lose, Pascal will get stopped. And again, Pascal doesn't have it. He's not close to the fighter that we saw um, defeat Chad Dawson. He's not close to the fighter that we saw give Kovalev two tough fights. Well, the first fight was tough for Kovalev. He's not the fighter that gave Carl Froch a heck of a fight, close to 10 years ago now. Um, Browne is going to win. I just don't hope. I hope that Pascal doesn't get seriously hurt. Um, I'll go to you, Daniel, and then you can follow up Gail and Jacob. You there, Daniel? Okay.
Yes. Oh God. This is like the set. This is a perfect example of what Jacob mentions, where there's some fighters that don't know when to stop. And Jean Pascal is one of those guys. He doesn't really know when to stop. We've already seen the best of him, and we've already seen downhill of him. There's no point to it, especially like a guy like Marcus Browne. Like a guy who's young, who can hit, who, if it wasn't for his stupidity and his own ill-begotten behavior, he've already been challenging for a world title. But this is just going to be sad. Browne is going to mop the floor of Pascal, unfortunately. And it's just going to be sad to see, because he should have retired after the second Kovalev fight. There was no point in going afterwards. But he continues. And we have a case now where he's going to get beaten down again, and God knows if he's going to continue again.
Gail and Jacob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have some of the same fears Daniel does. I think, however, what would be a worse fear is if Browne doesn't wipe the floor with them and they just both grind on each other for 12 rounds, and it's an ugly, ugly fight. I mean, we really do have to be careful. Pascal, has these flashes and he knows how to hang in. He is a veteran. He's got a lot of muscle memory in the ring. The skills are fading. Sometimes the will is there, sometimes it's not. And he is capable of a one-punch knockout if he gets lucky. Browne should win, but if Browne has to grind it out as a win, not a good look for him. And he's already got a lot of legal baggage outside the ring. Frankly, I'm surprised he's got this fight. I'm not sure what his issues continue to be or where his legal issues stand. He's been accused of repeated acts of domestic violence against a previous girlfriend. He's got to stay away from that person. He just needs to get his act together, or things are not going to end up well for him. So, I'm a little concerned about how this fight's going to play out, again, against the backdrop curtain of everything we've been talking about. So let's see which version of these guys comes out. But yeah, Jean Pascal really does not need to come into the ring again. He is one of the easiest guys to work with in the sport. He's tremendously generous, good guy, no drama, but wow, he needs to be done. He really needs to be done.
Go to you, Jacob. Do you share similar concerns to that Gail, Daniel, and myself do?
Yeah, I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but these guys don't know when to walk away. So, I'm not much more to say than that. I mean, Pascal doesn't need to be in there, but he's gonna be, and he might even be in there even after this fight, even if he does get beat down or not. But I don't know. Maybe these recent deaths will have a wake up call for some boxers, and maybe some of them will start to think twice about whether they want to move on, enjoy the later part of their life, and or just pick up a paycheck. But I hope so.
Yeah, let's hope so. Win or lose for Pascal. Um, if Marcus Browne is the fighter I think he is, he will win, and he will win comfortably. The question again, um, the safety, and as far as I'm concerned, of one Pascal. He's done too much for the sport for him to walk away seriously hurt. And let's hope that doesn't happen in this fight. If he lose, uh, let him lose without suffering too much damage. Hell, I'd be more than satisfied that he was to get cut early on and the fight get stopped because of that, than for him to receive sustained punishment in there, because I just that's just something I do not want to see. I'm sorry, that's just me. I just do not want to see him just get beat up. And I think we're going to shut down the show on that note. Want to thank everybody who joined us in the live YouTube chat. Want to thank Lisa. Want to thank me, myself, and I. Want to thank Denise, Hamed, and Quantum. I don't know what's going on between you two guys, but just chill with some of the language. Give a shout out to Cristiano NWO. Give a shout out to Jackson the Hopeful. What you need, he was in the chat as well. If you like what you've heard in this chat, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. And also subscribe to us on iTunes, subscribe to us on SoundCloud, subscribe to us on Spotify, all platforms in which pound for pound is carried, that carries RSS feed. And also check out the Facebook page. We're also on Facebook as well. I'm going to go around the panel here. Begin the show starting with ladies first. Going to end the show starting with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk media and media training, Dancing with the Stars, small business advice. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
You can hit me, first of all, by reading my column at Communities Digital News, which is COM, COMM, Digi, DIGI, News, comdiginews.com. On the Instagram and the Twitter, I am PR Pro San Diego.
Daniel from the Inscriber, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, folks. You can find me on Twitter, Ruckus99. Hopefully this week will be the show Jordan Francis. Unfortunately, my laptop is acting a little bit weird, but hopefully I should have it open then. And we'll definitely talk about the fights that are coming up. And I just feel bad for Pascal at a certain point. I do.
Yeah. I echo those sentiments. Last but certainly not least, but before I go to Jacob, I want to give a shout out to Gus, who wasn't able to join us this evening. Want to give a shout out to Bo from Truth and Facts. Shout out to the homie EJ Live over in the UK. My brethren over at Three Kings Boxing. Give a shout out to those fellas. Last but certainly not least, Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing, as well as a semi-regular on the Wrong Reel movie podcast. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk movies, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me on the show. And just wanted to say, shout out to the same people that you already gave a shout out to. It's been a truly an honor to be on this panel with these guests. Everybody always brings their A game, and I learned so much from you guys, and I'm always entertained, and I hope the fans out there are entertained. But yeah, make sure you follow Gail. She's an award-winning journalist. So
That's right.
a multi-award-winning journalist, and then Mike writes some pieces for Three Kings Boxing. Daniel has his show, and he does a lot of stuff for the Inscribers. So these guys are putting in the work, and they're doing good stuff. So support them, support the show. Yeah, I could be found at Twitter, JRATM23. You want to talk movies? You want to talk boxing? Those are, besides my family, those are my passions.
And for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk movies, for those who want to talk fitness, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said to begin the show, if you want to check out all things regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, the blog page is the place to go to. P4P Box Report .wordpress.com is the link. You check the right of the page. You can check the links to where to find us all over social media, Facebook, YouTube, and whatnot. Um, Also, where to find us on all platforms that carry RSS feed, and the links to the donate buttons, and the links to my online coaching, fitness coaching site for Beachbody. Again, Let's Build Challenge is ending this week. Going to start it up again in August. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Folks here on the show. If you're interested, let's build together challenge for August. You know what to do. You can hit the page there. You can check out the 2-week trials. They're continuous free 2-week trials on Beachbody.com or Beachbody Online, Beachbody on Demand. Excuse me, Beachbody on Demand. That runs all throughout the year. If you want to check that out, I would advise you do so. Bunch of programs that will suit everyone's interests, no matter what are your fitness goals. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Arreola Kownacki, of the fight between Browne and Pascal. As Gail noted, not much happening. We'll do a preview of Carl Frampton. He's going to be fighting in Philadelphia against a fighter by the name of Dominguez. Virgil Ortiz Jr., promising junior welterweight / welterweight. He's going to be fighting Antonio Orozco on the Zone. Will I talk Chavez Jr.? Nope. He's making his return to the ring. I refuse because, as I've said on more than one occasion, I got standards, so I'm not going to talk about that.
Don't worry,
Thank
Gail's
God.
going to report on that. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, oh my God.
So, for everybody who joined us in the live YouTube chat, Lisa, Denise, Quantum, um, uh, Hamed, uh, What You Need, Jackson the Hopeful, Cristiano. For everybody in the YouTube chat, thank you for joining us. For Gail for Communities, Digital News, uh, Daniel from The Inscriber, Jacob from Jab Hook. This has been episode 260 of Pound for Pound Box Report. I am your host, Michael. Again, August 1st, for those who do not know, they're going to end the live YouTube hangout recordings, but somehow, some way, we will find a way to have the Pound for Pound Box Report on YouTube on a weekly basis, even if we have to go underground Skype route. So yeah, for everybody here, Gail, Daniel, Jacob, I'm your host, Michael. Episode 260 of Pound for Pound Box Report. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.